Welcome and thank you for standing by. Currently, all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host for today, Crystal Jimerson.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on understanding the differences between statistics provided by the Population Estimates Program and the American Community Survey. I am Crystal Jimerson, and I'm a data dissemination specialist here at the U.S. Census Bureau. I want to thank you for joining us today for the Exploring the Diversity of Census Bureau Data webinar series. This new series created by the Census Academy team here at the Census Bureau is meant to assist the novice to intermediate data user. These webinars are a great opportunity for you to learn from our experts about how to access the Census Bureau data, tools, and resources. If you wish to follow along, take a moment now to open an additional browser. You can register for any of the webinars by visiting census.gov/academy. Before I introduce today's speakers, let's go over a few important housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome written questions during the webinar. Please submit your questions using the Q&A panel, which is at the bottom center or right side of your WebEx screen. Please take a moment to locate that now. Once you've found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose all panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your question. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your questions. We suggest keeping the chat panel open as well, as we will provide links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind you won't be able to respond to the chat. That is for us to send out links and other resources related to the presentation. My colleagues, Jolie and Kelly, will be monitoring the Q&A panel, and as time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the panel, or we will share your question with the presenters to respond to during the webinar. If we do not get to all questions with a response during the webinar, we will post the questions and responses with the webinar materials on the census.gov/academy site within 30 business days. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser such as Chrome or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting the computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers, Lacey Lofton and Eric Jensen. Thanks again for being here today. Lacey, you may begin.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, Lisa. And thank you for everybody who's joining us today for this webinar. We're really excited to be talking about two of our very popular data sources that have a lot of excellent uses. But this webinar is part of many of the resources that the Census Bureau has. So we wanted to tell you about a few other places that you can go to find help if you ever need it. So first of all, I'm a data dissemination training specialist, and we have people like me across the country. So if you want somebody either in person or somebody to do a webinar for you that is really familiar with your geographical area, you can reach out to us and we can find a way to either come to you in person or do something virtually that's specific for either you or your group. We also have on our website a lot of data gems that really focus on specific things that people either get stuck on. So like if you're used to using a tool and you keep getting stuck in the same place, this is a great place to check back to. We update these consistently with things that people are asking about and need to know. So keep an eye on those. We also have courses. So as Lisa mentioned, this is going to be recorded and it's going to be posted on our census.gov/academy site, so you can access this. But we've also been doing webinars for years and years, and there's a really great library there too. So especially if it's outside of business hours and you're stuck, that's a great place to look. And last but not least, you are in one of our interactive webinars right now. So this is a resource that's available as well. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get information about anything that's upcoming or anything that's posted that's new. It's actually how I keep up with what we're doing. So it's a great resource there. Last but not least, if you can't find what you're looking for on our website, you can always reach out to us at census.askdata@census.gov or the phone number that's listed there. So this is me. I'm a statistician with the Census Bureau. As I mentioned, I'm a data dissemination specialist. So it's my job to help anybody who's looking to access data find that. All of our data is free. It's publicly available on our website, but it can be a little daunting sometimes to find exactly what you're looking for. So that's my job. And with that, Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can introduce yourself and walk us through the Population Estimates Program.
All right. Thank you, Lacey. I'm going to start off by just quickly introducing myself. There's me, that's a big picture. But my name is Eric Jensen. I'm a demographer in the Population Division of the Census Bureau. My main work focuses on population estimates and coverage measurement. I led the 2020 Demographic Analysis Program, which is one of our 2 measures of undercounts and overcounts in the decennial census. My research focuses on census coverage, historically undercounted populations, international migration, measuring racial and ethnic diversity, and also population estimates. Just excited today to talk about the population estimates and the American Community Survey. So just an overview for today's presentation. We're going to start off, I'm going to talk about Population Estimates Program. Then Lacey's going to talk about the American Community Survey. Then we'll jump back to me. I'll give a little bit about the differences between the two, understanding when to use pop estimates, when to use the ACS, and then Lacey's going to do a demo of the QuickFacts application. So I'll start off with population estimates. So the Population Estimates Program, we release official population measures, official population estimates of housing and population, and we basically are taking the most recent decennial census and updating that for demographic change over the decade. So our population estimates are mandated by law, and along with other census programs such as the ACS, they're used to inform over $1 trillion of federal spending each year. And the estimates have other uses as well. So, for example, the population estimates are used as controls for our demographic surveys, like the American Community Survey or the Current Population Survey. They're also used to calculate as denominators when calculating vital rates. And so they're used by other federal agencies for that purpose. They're used for academic and business research. They're used in program planning in both the public and private sectors. So our most current population estimates are as of the date July 1, 2023. We've been making population estimates at the Census Bureau since 1900. And every year we release population estimates for 80,000 geographic areas in the United States and Puerto Rico. So this table shows some of the content that we have in the population estimates. As far as social characteristics, we don't have those in the population estimates, and I'll talk more about that later. We also don't have economic characteristics, but what we have is a lot of demographic information. So we have total population, we have age, we have sex, we have race, we have Hispanic origin. We also release data on the components of change, and so births and deaths and net migration. We have data on group quarters populations. We have different population universes, for example, like the resident population, the resident plus the armed forces overseas population, the civilian population, the civilian non-institutionalized population, and the household population. And then for housing, we release the total number of housing units. This, I want to say graph, I don't know, chart or whatever it is, shows the different geographic levels that we have for our population estimates. So of course we have data at the national level, then regions and divisions. We have data for all states. We also have data for Puerto Rico. We have data for all the counties in the United States, and for Puerto Rico we have municipios, which that's the equivalent of a county in Puerto Rico. We release data for the metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas. And then we have incorporated places and minor civil divisions. So in total, this is over 80,000 geographic areas. And this is data for 40,000 or more communities. So it's a very important resource. This table shows sort of the level of detail for which we released all of this different information. So we have different estimate type, and then across the top we have different geographic levels. For the total resident population, we release this for every one of those geographies that I showed in the graph just now. So for the national, for all states, for the metro micro, for counties, cities and towns, for Puerto Rico, Commonwealth, and for the municipios. For components of change, so births, deaths, and net migration, we do this for the U.S., for states, metro micro, and for counties. We also do it for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. We don't do it, however, for cities and towns. Also, we don't do it for the municipios. For age, sex, race, Hispanic origin, we do that for the U.S., states, micro, metro, micro, statistical areas, and counties. And then for Puerto Rico, we do age and sex, both at the Commonwealth, for the Commonwealth and for the municipios. At the national level, we release our population universes, which I mentioned before. Then group quarters, we do this at the national level by characteristics, and for totals at the states and counties. Then our housing units, we release those for the nation, states, and counties. So for the nation, state, and county population estimates, we develop those using what's called the cohort component method. So for that, we start with a base population, and that normally is data that's coming from the most recent decennial census. To that, we add births, we subtract deaths, and then we add net migration, and that gives us our population estimate. For cities and towns, we use what's called a distributive housing unit method. So we start with the household population per housing unit. You might hear this called like the persons per household or PPH. We multiply that by the number of housing units. Then we have a rake factor, which basically ensures that the total pop for the county will match what we have in our county estimates. And then we add the group quarters population, and that gives us our population estimate for cities and towns. This table shows the different data that are used for each of those components. So for the base population, we use data from the most recent census. In the past, we would have used only data from the decennial census, but for this decade, we're using what we call our blended base approach. So we're taking 2020 census data, data from the vintage 2020 population estimates, and data from our 2020 demographic analysis, and we're combining that or blending that to make our base population. Then for our births, we get birth records from the National Center for Health Statistics. Those birth records are created from birth certificates. We also get death records from the National Center for Health Statistics, and similarly, those are coming from death records. For our domestic migration component, we use IRS tax records and also Medicare enrollment records. And then for international migration, we use a number of different data sources, but primarily the American Community Survey. We also use the Puerto Rico Community Survey, and we use data from foreign countries' censuses and population registers. So these are all the different data sets that we use. So we release our population estimates kind of on a rolling basis. In December, we usually release the total population and voting age population, and this is for the nation and states. We also release components of population change for the nations and states at that time, and then the voting age 18 plus for the nation, states, and Puerto Rico Commonwealth. In March, we released the metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas and also counties, so the total population. And then we also do the Puerto Rico Commonwealth and Municipio total population at that time. In April, we released the single year of age by sex for the nation. In May, we released the cities and towns, so these are our sub-county estimates. So that includes incorporated places, minor civil divisions. We also have our housing unit release, so nation, states, and counties. And then June is kind of our big release because that's our characteristics. So in June, we're going to have at the national, state, and county level, we're going to have age, sex, race, Hispanic origin for all those different geographies. And then we release age and sex at that time for Puerto Rico Commonwealth and municipios. So there's several ways you can access the population estimates. One of the main ways is on our population estimates program webpage. This is part of this is part of census.gov. You can also use QuickFacts, and increasingly people are using the application programming interface or API to access our estimates. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Lacey to talk about the ACS.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So we have a lot of different surveys and censuses going on all the time, and they all have different methodologies, and the data is produced in different ways. But these two are really commonly used for population, and then some of the specific details about those populations. So we wanted to walk through how each of them are collected and how they're produced. So the American Community Survey is a sample survey. It is a big sample survey, though. It goes to 3.5 million households a year. And so we have a really big base of data that we can use to produce data on an annual basis. So there are a lot of different ways this data is used. Certainly, users are a variety of things, but the main reason we do it is for distribution of federal funds, and it's part of the decennial census. So it's required by law, and it's mandated by Congress that we do this. So there are a lot of different data points we produce as well. So it's 40 topics, but each of these have dozens of data points within them. We're going to walk through a little bit there as well. And then we have 3 main releases a year. So we, as I said, we go to 3.5 million households a year. For any place that has a population of 65,000 people or more, we're able to produce data for that area every single year. So our latest year would be 2022, and we release it for just that 1 year. If it's a smaller area where we don't have as large of a data source in order to produce those data, we'll actually combine 5 years of data in order to produce them for those lower geographies. So if you're looking for, say, your zip code, or you live in a smaller town or less populated county, you'd be using the 5-year estimates. Okay, so a little bit about our collection process. And it's changed. It's amazing how quickly things have changed lately. But first, we send a postcard to a respondent. We say, hey, you've been chosen for the American Community Survey. Please go online if you can and fill out this questionnaire for every single person in your household. And that is how we collect most of the data. If somebody wants to, they can fill out a paper form and mail it back in. And then also we have field reps who can come visit you. We can collect the data that way. And then if you are meeting with your field rep, we can actually even do some of those interviews over the phone. Once we get that information, obviously it goes back to the Census Bureau. We tabulate it and produce all the data products that we'll be talking about later. Here are the 4 main topics or groups of topics that are produced by the American Community Survey. And again, these are produced under a really low geography, which can be really helpful if you're looking for, say, information about your neighborhood or just a smaller physical area. So we have information, we have 4 different, they're called demographic profiles. Social includes things like education, and that's both educational attainment and then if you're currently enrolled in school. Marital status, relationships within the household. So we'll ask the person filling out the questionnaire, how are you related to the other people that you live with? Information about fertility and information about grandparents who are living with their family and what child care duties they may have for young children. We have the economic portion of this, and it can be a little confusing in terminology, or maybe it's just me. But remember when you're looking at our economic data that this is the economic situation of the household. So we're asking all of these questions of individuals living within the household. So we have information about income. Where does your income come from? And we have really detailed data there. Employment, are you employed? What kind of sector are you employed in? If you're unemployed, how long have you been unemployed? Things like that. Very detailed information about occupation. How do people get to work? Which is something that is changing rapidly as well. On the housing, so this green section here, we have information about, is a housing unit occupied or is it vacant? Basic information about the structure. We ask the individuals about housing value and cost. So we ask, what do you believe that your house is worth? And then also some basic information about basically what it costs to keep a roof over your head in the area. So very basic information there. And then utilities. So what utilities do you have access to and which ones are you using? The maroon, I'm going to call it maroon, the demographic section up in the top right corner. These questions are completely comparable to the previous decennial census. So for the data that you would be looking at right now for the American Community Survey, we ask the exact same questions in the exact same way that we did for the 2020 decennial census. And this is really cool because you've always got this baseline and you can go back and you're comparing apples to apples, right? Because we asked it the exact same way. So, decennials is, the biggest game in town. Everybody knows about that one. But these supplemental estimates that come after the fact, you can go back and see how things have changed over time by using the decennial census as your baseline. And then with the demographics going forward, in fact, it's a completely comparable data set. So I mentioned this one, but it's a lot easier to understand kind of in graphic form. So again, if you live in an area or you're studying an area that has 65,000 people or more, we have 1-year estimates. And so what that means right now is if you're looking at 2022 data, it's every household that we surveyed between January 1st of 2022 and December 31st of 2022. And because there's enough people there, we're able to produce statistics just from that time frame because we don't have to worry about accidentally disclosing information about an individual person or a household because there's just enough population there. For the smaller areas, so if you're between 20,000 and 64,000, we do have supplemental estimates that we produce every year. But our biggest data set, and my favorite and probably the most commonly used, is the 5-year estimates. So right now, so they are produced for all geographies, or we at least attempt to produce them for all geographies. There may be some individual variables that we aren't able to publish for various reasons. But this is a really safe data set to use too, because even if you live in a really big place, right, and you're doing all this work and you're doing all this research, if then you want to compare, say I'm outside of Austin, Texas. If I decide, hey, okay, I've done all this work and I'm using 1-year data because I can, because Austin's big enough, but then I want to compare it to the zip code I live in, only 5-year data is going to be available for the zip code. And as a basic statement, you don't want to be using different data sets. So if you're using 1-year estimates, you want to only be comparing 1-year estimates to 1-year estimates. If you're using 5-year estimates, you only want to use 5-year estimates to compare to other 5-year estimates. So 5 years is your safest bet. I've had a lot of heartache thinking I want to stick with 1-year estimates and then not being able to do some of those comparisons. But certainly if you want to look at quickly changing populations, 1 year's got a lot of positives as well. All right, Eric, back to the differences between the two.
All right, thanks, Lacey. So I'm going to talk about differences between pop estimates and the ACS results. So this table kind of talks about the differences between the two. So first of all, the purpose. The ACS is a survey, so it's a sample of the population, and it's using that to look at the characteristics of the U.S. population, look at the demographic characteristics, social, economic characteristics. The pop estimates is different. We're not a survey. We're not a sample. We're basically taking the most recent census and then using administrative records and other data, we're updating those census counts to account for demographic change over the period. So we're not using a sample of birth records or a sample of death records. We're using all of the births and all the deaths that we get from the National Center for Health Statistics. Like I mentioned, the ACS collects detailed social, economic, housing, and demographic characteristics, whereas the pop estimates, we're not collecting any data. We're using existing data sources to make the estimates. As far as content, population housing characteristics, whereas for the pop estimates, we have no social and economic detail. So you can't get like the median income or the poverty from the pop estimates. But we do have the demographic characteristics, the same ones that are on the decennial census. So we have age, sex, race, Hispanic origin. And we also have the number of housing units. Both the ACS and the pop estimates are released each year. As Lacey mentioned, the ACS 1-year data, it's basically the period of January 1st to December 31st of that year. And the 5-year estimates are the period from January 1st of the first year in the file to December 31st of the last year in the file. And the way to interpret that, it's a period estimate. And so it's the average over the 5 years. Pop estimates is different. We have an estimates date. And so for our monthly files, it's the first day of that month. For most of our estimates, it's July 1. And that's an important time for demographers because it's the midpoint of the year. So in theory, half of the people will have had their birthday by July 1, and the other half will have their birthday afterwards. And so as far as doing age and other things, it's a really important kind of date for us. So geography, as Lacey mentioned, for populations of 65,000 or more, we have the 1-year ACS. And then for especially smaller geographies like census tracts, people use the 5-year data. For our geographies, I mentioned earlier, we have the nation states, counties, micropolitan and metropolitan statistical areas, also Puerto Rico Commonwealth and Puerto Rico municipios, and then statistics. So because the ACS is a sample, you have sampling error, and so you can calculate the margin of error, which is the 90% confidence interval, and you can look at relationships between like places, and you can see, are they statistically different? We're not able to do that with the pop estimates. We're not a product of sampling, so we don't have any kind of uncertainty measure or confidence interval. You don't need one with our estimates. One thing we do have is when we release our vintage of population estimates, we release a time series back to the most recent census. So our vintage 2023 estimates would have July 1st, 2023, and July 1st, 2022, 2021, back to July 1st, 2020. And so you can, if you're doing you can do some time series analysis using our population estimates. So how are they similar? So both include total population and housing unit estimates. Both have population characteristics by age, sex, race, Hispanic origin. This is really important, but the pop estimates are used as controls for the ACS for both the population and housing unit data. And so the one-year population estimates, or the one-year ACS estimates, should be consistent with the population estimates because of that control. So we do that control to account for coverage in the survey. We know that we're not going to, that with our survey and all the things we do to get a correct sample and everything, there's still going to be some coverage issues. And so we use this population estimate as a control. And this is commonly done when producing surveys. All of our major demographic surveys at the Census Bureau are controlled through the population estimates. So what this means is that the ACS estimate for those for larger geographies is going to match the pop estimates almost exactly. And in fact, if you look at the table here below, this is taken from data.census.gov. It's a total population for the United States in 2022. This is using the one-year data. If you notice, there's the estimate, 333 million. But if you look at the margin of error, there's all these little asterisks. And that's because technically there is no margin of error for that one-year estimate from the ACS because it's controlled to our population estimates. There's no survey, there's no variability for that. It's controlled exactly. And so you'll see this as you're using ACS data. Sometimes the margin of error will show these little asterisks, and that's because it's an estimate from the survey that matches exactly to the population estimates. Okay, so when to use ACS versus the population estimates. So if your focus is looking at population housing unit totals and demographic characteristics, age, sex, race, Hispanic origin, you should use the population estimates. If you're looking at social and economic characteristics, you need to use the ACS. You can get, for example, the number of children living in a county from the population estimates, but you can't get the number of children in poverty living in that same county from the population estimates. For that, you need to use the ACS. So for estimates, percentages, means, medians, rates, and those different things, you can get those from both the ACS or the pop estimates, depending on what subject you're looking at. So for pop estimates, we have median age, and we'll report that at different geographic levels. But if you want to know like the percent of people in the county with a percent of adults with a high school diploma, you would have to look at the ACS. If you're conducting statistical tests in order to compare from one place to another to see if it's the difference is statistically significant, you need to use the ACS for that. Again, we don't have those margins of error for the pop estimates. We just don't need them given how they're produced. And then finally, if you're doing a mixture of population and housing or social or economic, you could use all ACS, especially if it has social or economic variables, or you can use all of the population estimates if it's like population and housing, and you're only concerned about like housing unit totals. But we don't encourage people like to mix like ACS and pop estimates data in the same analysis. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn over to Lacey to do a demo of our Quick Facts application.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Does that look right? Did it come up? Wait, there we go. Okay, can everybody see Quick Facts now?
Yes.
Okay, it's like, yeah, somebody not. Okay, great. Thank you guys, I appreciate it. So this is one of my actually favorite data tools because we have, like I said, we have so many different data sources and so many different places that you can go looking for data and so many different ways they're produced. But most of the customers I speak to, they're just like, I just want a number. I don't necessarily need all of the ins and outs in the background. And this is a really good tool to just get some of the basic information that you need. It includes data from all states, all counties, and then also all cities and towns. And you'll actually see that when we go through the data, it'll say like, we're going to pull up where I live, which is Leander, Texas, but it'll say like Leander City, Texas. But it's great at just pulling basic information about your area and also comparing it to other areas. So you can see like not only what's happening where you live, but how that compares to other places around the country. So it's always going to default to the United States. So let's add some more places in here to make it a little more interesting before we walk through it. This is a fun way to find out how many places in the country have a name similar to your place. I'm going to do Texas. When I type in Texas, it's obviously going to come up with like every single city in Texas, which there are quite a few of them. I have some friends who might know off the top of their head. I do not. But the very first one should be the state if you're looking for a state. And then after that, it'll be in alphabetical order for all the cities that fall within it. So I'm going to choose Texas. And you'll see it just really quickly pops up right here. So now we have Texas and the United States. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, especially if anybody's on a phone or tablet. So here's Texas and here's the United States. I'm going to add one more thing before we go and look through the data and see its sources. Like I said, I live in Leander, Texas. And it's a fun one to use because it's not that common of a name, but you'll see it says Leander City, Texas. Sometimes that confuses people. It'll also have like villages or townships. So whatever the incorporation style of where you live is, it'll pop up that way. We'll choose that. And here we go. So now we have Leander, Texas, the state of Texas, and the United States. So we'll walk through this really quickly, and then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A. So when you have questions while we're walking through this, just type them into the chat and we'll make sure that we either get to them today or we'll get back to you over the next couple of days if we don't have time. At the very top here, what Eric was telling you about, this data comes from the Population Estimates Program. So the latest version is July 1st of 2023. Not only do I just happen to know that, and population estimates is pretty straightforward, if you need to know what the data source is, you can click on the info bubble there, and so it'll tell you it's from the Population Estimates Program. It'll also give you some helpful links. So this will happen with different data points. So if you want to go to the main landing page for the Population Estimates Program, you can access that here. And then it has just basic information that you might need. If you're going to be handing this data off to someone or talking to someone else about it, we don't want you to have to go do all the research behind it too. We try to make it easy for you to find the information that you would need there. So basic information about the population, and then we get into age and sex. So you've got young children under 5, people under the age of 18, and then people over the age of 65. We have information on Hispanic origin and race, veterans data, and then the foreign-born population. I think you'll probably notice here that we start having a range of dates. So for veterans data, it's 2018 to 2022. And if we click on this info button, you'll see that this is from the American Community Survey. So it's that 5-year estimate. So that's another way you can tell where that data source is from. But again, a lot of times people are like, I just want to know the number. I don't need to know every single thing, every place it came from. This is a great tool to just get you those numbers. But if you do need more information, it's here as well. For housing, we have information about housing units. Are they occupied, not occupied? Information about value. We also have some information on building permits that were issued as well. Family and living arrangements, so basically how people in the household are related. But we also have information about like how mobile is a specific population. We'll ask people, did you live in this house a year ago? And if not, where did you come from? So you can see migration patterns that way. Language, other than English spoken at home. So if you're looking to see for isolated linguistical populations, people that speak a language other than English at home, you can find that information here. Computer and internet use, which is a big hot topic right now, depending on where you are. Then educational attainment. Scroll down here. We have some basic information about health. So we ask if people feel that they have a disability. If they do, that will be reflected here. And then the economic data that we spoke about. Basic information about transportation, mean travel time to work. I've never given a presentation where anybody felt that this was anything other than understated, but this is the data that we have about how long it takes to get to work for people living in your area. And then last but certainly not least, for the demographic side, we have income and poverty information. So just as a quick, comparison, what I love about this is so here's Leander, Texas, here's Texas, and here's the United States. And you can see that right here, the percentage of people living in poverty is significantly lower than the state, which is higher than the country. So it's a really quick and easy way to create a table that will show you these comparisons and really understand how your area compares to some other ones around the country. And it's whichever ones you choose. Here we have business information. This is, and before I say the wrong thing, okay, good. This is in county business patterns, and this has a lot of information as well. We didn't speak about it today, but wanted to point it out because it is part of this tool, and it's a really great survey that has a really wealthy, really great depth of data available from it. So information about businesses, ownership, and annual payroll, thing along those lines. And last but not least, geography. This one I feel like is overlooked way too often. Understanding exactly what the area you're talking about or researching is really important too. So information about population per square mile, basic land area, and then a FIPS code. So if you're going to pull this into anything else, that geography code can be really important. This is where I come to get a lot of those things that aren't easy to find other places. I'm going to scroll back up to the top and show you just a couple of other. Sorry, I'm scrolling a little too fast there. A couple of the other features that this tool has. My pop-up is covering those tools. Okay, there. So right now we're on the table view, but if you want to, if you choose, so first you pick the data point that you're interested in. So let's start with population estimates, right up Eric's presentation alley. So we're going to look, if we click on chart, it'll pop up with all of the different geographies that you've already chosen. And I want to see how my city compares to other cities. So it's going to pull other cities in the area and show you the comparison there. So population, Houston is winning the race there. At San Antonio, you just scroll down and then we find, oh, did I pass it? I'm going to say we're going to be way down here. But this just gives you a feel for some of the other areas, some of the other cities in your area and how you compare in any of the different data points that we have here. So you could do this for poverty, you could do this for commuting time to home. And in theory, I've probably picked too small a place. It's a quick and easy way to see how you compare to the other places around you. If you want to download any of these, this actually, well, I'm going to go back to the table. But if you want to download this, this actually makes a really nice PDF. It's like 2 pages front and back, depending on your settings on your computer, but it's actually really nice and easy to read. So handing it off to someone, you can print it there or save it as a PDF. Then you can also save it as a CSV or send it as an email. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Kelly. I know there's a lot more that we could talk about here, but Kelly's going to let us know if there are any questions in the chat, and that way we can just navigate what we're talking about going forward that way.
Okay, thank you, Lacey. We do have some questions. The
Awesome.
first question, I believe this one's going to go to Eric. Eric, what does it mean that the PEP estimates are used as controls for ACS?
Yeah, so with all of the demographic surveys conducted by the Census Bureau and by actually a lot of other federal agencies and organizations as well, they use a independent control to weight their surveys. And so as part of the weighting process, they have an initial weight that is basically your selection into the sample for the ACS. And then there's other stages of weighting. And then towards the end, they have a weight for the number of housing units. And then finally, there's a weight for the population controls. So what it means is the survey estimates get weighted up to match the population estimates.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I believe, Eric, this is for you as well. Are population estimates available for small geographic areas like tracts and blocks?
They're not available for tracts or blocks. Our smallest geographic area, we do population estimates for cities and towns. And then so that's our smallest geographic area. But the ACS you can get with a 5-year file, you can get like census tracts. And so people often use that for neighborhoods. But for pop estimates, cities and towns are the smallest. But we do release those every year, which is different than the ACS, which you can only get the smallest geographies every 5 years. Or, I mean, with a 5-year file.
Okay. This is a similar question about availability from population estimates. Are the population estimates available for Pacific Islands like American Samoa, Guam, et cetera?
They're not. We do population estimates for the U.S. and Puerto Rico, but we don't include island areas.
Okay. Another question for you, actually, this might be for Lacey. In the tables, can you combine geographies to make a neater table if you want to see how a group of counties or cities compares to the corresponding state and U.S.?
So we don't have that capability within this tool. Yeah, we do actually have some tools that will do that. And if you want to go to Census Academy, our Census Business Builder does a really good job of doing some of those combining areas where you can basically make a more custom geography. But within this tool, it's just standalone geographies.
Okay, thank you. Another question, this goes back to the population data. I am looking for population age breakdown. For example, 0 to 14 years, 15 to 64, 65 and over. So they're looking for age category data. Is this information available in PEP, or is it available in ACS, or both?
I'll let you go first, Eric.
Yeah, so it's available in both. For pop estimates, it really depends on your geography. This year, for Vintage 2023, we released at the county level a single year of age file. We always release at the national level a single year of age file. So from that, you should be able to combine and make whatever custom age groups you want. In the ACS, there's tables that have age groups. Mostly 5-year age groups is pretty common, but there are, for some ages, you can get single year of age. So detailed age information is available in both the pop estimates and in the ACS. It really depends on your geographic level that you're interested in. For instance, if you want county level data or state data, you can get that from pop estimates. Again, though, if you want the smaller geographies for age, you'd have to go to the ACS, and then it would be probably like a 5-year file. Do you have anything, Lacey, to add to that?
No, I was just going to say that is, yes, that data definitely exists, and it exists from different places. If you get stuck, I think it's really specific, again, depending on your geography, and also depending on if you have a very specific age range that you're looking for, we will pre-tabulate some of this with our own age ranges. There are different reasons that we do publish at those different intervals. But if you ever get stuck, just use that ask data or reach out to us directly and we can help you with that. Because if you're struggling with it, we've already had to struggle through it ourselves. So we can help you find that for your specific area and specific need.
Okay, great. Another question. If I wanted to know how many total housing units, both occupied and vacant, there are in the U.S., would ACS or PEP be better?
ACS would be better for that question because you're asking, so POP estimates would only have the total number of housing units, whereas with the ACS, you can get occupied and vacant units. And so because you want that characteristic, occupied or vacant, you'd use the American Community Survey.
Okay. One last question. When will the 2010 to 2020 intercental estimates become available?
Great question. We get that a lot. So intercental estimates are where we take the estimate series that's based on the 2010 census, and we and then we have another endpoint, the 2020 census, and we kind of reconcile that. We make it consistent throughout for the two censuses. So we're planning to release that in October of this year. So the intercental estimate should be available then.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal to wrap up the webinar.
Hello. Those were some great questions. So thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Jolie. But thank you very much, Lacey and Eric, for this informative presentation and the quick facts demonstration. Before we conclude, I'd like to thank everyone who played a role in today's webinar. We thank you, our audience, for spending your time with us this afternoon. We are very interested in hearing from you on how we are doing, so please take a moment to fill out the evaluation that will appear when you exit the webinar. Look out for the recording, the presentation, and related materials from this webinar on the Census Academy site by visiting census.gov/academy within 30 business days. Please check out the Census Academy for additional training resources and to register for our upcoming webinars. That brings us to a close, and we thank you again for joining us today and hope you have a great afternoon.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.